I just completed a sober month where I didn't drink alcohol for 30 days, and there's a lot of interesting things that I realized.
Oh, hi, Mark.
What's up, Freccero fam? Welcome back to my channel where I like to experience everything that life has to offer. I decided from this point moving forward, every year, I'm going to start out with a challenge month. That for the month of January, to kick off the year in the right way, I'm going to do a bunch of challenges and really focus on mental health, physical health, and overall health and wellness. And in addition to that, I'm also going to do a dry January every year. I feel like it's a good way to be healthy, start off the year, like I said, on the right foot. And I just completed my dry January. And I gotta say, there's a lot of really interesting things that I've learned going sober for 30 days about the way we view alcohol, how it's prevalent in our society, the good and the bad about alcohol, and a lot more. So in this video, I'm really gonna do a deep dive on all the interesting things I've learned after being sober for 30 days. First off, let's talk about the guidelines of dry January. You don't drink. That's it. Pretty simple and straightforward. I will say I like to tack on other challenges on top of that, and every year I'm going to mix it up in terms of what I'm doing. But when it comes to doing a dry January, I know, Captain Obvious, but you don't drink. It's interesting though, because last year I did what I called Jacked January. I know the alliteration worked for that one, where I tried to see how many pounds of muscle I could build in 30 days. Unfortunately, I did get hurt, but I built 4.6 pounds of muscle in 23 days. Like I said, I did have to end the challenge early, and during that month, I allowed myself to have only 2 drinks on a Friday night maximum, 2 drinks on a Saturday night maximum. I want to mention that briefly because I have noticed it's interesting doing, like, say, a full dry January where you don't drink at all versus being like, okay, I can only have 1 drink here and there. I know some people do, I think they call it a driest January, where they only drink socially or whatever, but for me, I feel like just going completely dry, not drinking any alcohol whatsoever is the way to go. And also, I might as well mention, this includes other drugs. I really only drink, to be honest, but I do know some people do things like California sober. I know is a phrase I've heard a lot where you don't drink any alcohol or do any drugs, but you have weed or marijuana. It is legal here in California. For me, I've never really been a smoker though. But in terms of the guidelines, again, I know Captain Obvious, but might as well mention it for this video. No alcohol whatsoever. In addition, with that being said, I want to talk about how I drink normally, because it is important. I feel like looking at the contrast, to compare and contrast when I drink normally versus when I don't. I typically only drink socially, and I only drink on the weekends, unless it's like a special occasion on a Tuesday or a very special event or a friend's birthday, whatever. I really only drink on the weekends. So in general, just to provide some context for this video, I typically drink about 1 to 2 times a week. With all that being said now, I want to talk about the things I experienced, the good, the bad, the ugly, so to speak. And getting into it, I want to talk first about feeling better. This is the biggest thing I hear a lot, like when I go out and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing a dry January. A lot of people are like, oh, I bet you feel way better. Yes and no. I know that sounds weird, but I like to be very transparent on my videos. And I want to say, especially if you look at all the recent studies, the huge alcohol podcast by Andrew Huberman, it's no surprise probably to anybody, alcohol is horrible for you. And there's been a tremendous amount of studies that basically show even just 1 drink messes up your sleep a lot. There are a couple myths out there where it's like, oh, if you have a glass of wine a day, it's good for your heart or something like that. Not true whatsoever. As Andrew Huberman demonstrated in that podcast, he said, to word it super simply, anything above 2 drinks a week is detrimental to your health, both mental and physical health.
Most healthy adults can safely consume,
there we go,
1 to 2 drinks per week before the negative effects of alcohol start to set in.
You're cutting out. You're cutting out. You're cutting out. I can't hear you.
So the whole notion of, oh, only have maximum 2 a day. I know that thing is what the FDA suggests. No, not true. Maximum 2 drinks a week. Anything above that has, I know a bit of a bold word, but severe health consequences. And I think that's important to mention because for me, I don't drink every day. I feel like if I drank every day and then I went sober, I'd notice, I think, a bigger difference or a more drastic difference in terms of my health and how I was feeling and energy levels and everything. I gotta be honest when I say that I felt in general the same as I do than, let's say, when I am drinking. That being said, one, I don't want to discourage anybody being like, oh, trust me, if you go sober, you're not going to notice a difference. No. Like I said, the studies don't lie. Alcohol is horrible for you. And two, although in general I felt about the same on the weekends, of course, clear difference. Just in the fact that on a Saturday morning, I'd wake up, and as opposed to, like, say, on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, waking up, and trust me when I say I've tried every hangover cure out there, even still, even if I have like a bunch of Pedialyte or Miracle or DHM or Milk Thistle or all these different hangover cures, even still waking up on a Saturday or Sunday morning, I feel a bit groggy, I'm not fully there. I'm definitely not operating at 100% the best version of myself, of course. So of course, waking up on a Saturday and Sunday morning when being sober, then compared to when drinking, of course I feel way better. There's definitely no denying that, right? Have to mention that on the weekends, of course, I felt a lot better. So it was almost like the forest versus the trees analogy, where from a big picture perspective, when I look back on the month, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I felt about the same. But in terms of those individual times, of course, when I'd wake up on a morning that, like, say, typically I'd drink the night beforehand, of course, I felt way better than if I had gone out and drank. Next, I'm going to talk about money. This one is both shocking and not at the same time. I didn't expect to save as much money as I did. Now, what's awesome about last month, I spent the least amount of money I've spent in months, and I actually made the most amount of money I've made in months. So it's a cool kind of double whammy in a good way of spending less money than I typically do and making more money than I typically do. And one really interesting thing about going sober is you realize how much money, not even talking about time, which obviously is a whole other thing, but how much money you spend when it comes to drinking. And I know when I say that, you probably think, oh yeah, drinks are expensive. It's not just that. Like, let's say I go out, to use an example, on a Friday night, right? Well, first off, I usually stop at the store, grab like a Pedialyte or Body Armor. Huge fan of Body Armor. I'll get one of those, grab a few drinks when it comes to pre-gaming. Then I'll come back to my house, and typically I might grab like a meal when I go out, let's say some Chipotle or something, because I come home, want to kind of eat quick, and then I'm gonna go out with friends. So I'm already spending money on an electrolyte beverage, some drinks for pre-gaming, and some food because I'm typically not going to be making my own food at home. And then I'll take Ubers and Lyfts to go out to my friend's place, right? Got to be safe and responsible. So Uber there, like, so we pregame, then we can go out. Then, like, say, of course, I'm buying drinks and everything. Then I Uber back to my place, or maybe even before I do, I might probably grab food, right? Because I'm drunk and I want food. So I might grab food when I'm out, or maybe I'll order Uber Eats when I get back. And then the next morning, because, like, say I'm hungover and I'm not feeling the best, and this has happened to me before, I'm like, all right, I don't really feel like making anything. I'm not sure what I should have. You know what? I'm just going to order delivery and get some ramen delivered to my house. And when you add up all these different things from, like, say, the electrolyte beverage in the beginning, plus the pregame drinks, the food that I got, the Ubers and Lyfts, bouncing around the city and everything, especially here in LA, you kind of have to go very, very far, to the prices of the drinks at the bar. And as a quick side note, I say the average price of a beer, including tax and tip, maybe like $10 here. If I, like, say, have 3 beers at a bar, that's $30 right there. Never even minding everything else I'm doing in that night. And so again, I know this is a bit maybe obvious to people, being like, oh, you save a lot of money when you don't drink. But it's not just that, it's all the other things too. Like, when I'm sober, I can drive to and from the venue. I don't have to worry about, like, say, waking up the next morning, not feeling the best, and ordering food. And I feel like I'm not the only person that's probably done this. I don't have to worry about, like, say, ordering Uber Eats, falling asleep, waking up, and realizing that the $40 worth of Uber Eats that I just ordered was left outside my door, and now it's cold and I have to throw it away. In addition, one of my main non-alcoholic choices, I actually call it a Freccero, just because it's easy to order with my friends, is club soda with lime, and if they have it, mint. When it comes to most bars, for most kind of like sodas on tap that they have, typically it is free. In addition, if I get, like, say, a non-alcoholic beer, typically it is going to be cheaper. However, it does depend. I did a video where I went out and quote-unquote partied while drinking only non-alcoholic beer. And I remember, and I mentioned this in that video, that it's interesting, depending on the bar, some bars, the non-alcoholic beer can actually be more expensive than the alcoholic counterpart. And it is the definition of irony that I'm spending more money to not consume alcohol because I'm having a non-alcoholic beer. But in general, when you look at the bigger picture, it's just insane with so many different things considered of how much money you save not drinking. Not just in terms of alcohol itself, but everything around alcohol that you realize how much, gotta be honest, of a money waste it is. And with that being said, of course, gotta talk about time. Just in general, you have more time to do stuff, especially on the weekends. Because I found before, I'd almost look at every week, and I feel like everyone does this too, I guess, as like 5 plus 2. Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday. I guess Friday's both a weekend and a weekday, but in general, I always looked at the week as like the 5 days of the week, and then the 2 days of the weekend, and they're a bit different. But when I went sober, I almost looked at the week not as a 5 plus 2, but as just a 7, if that makes sense. In the aspect that, let's say if I want to film a video like this on a Saturday morning, previously I was like, okay, I don't know, if I go out the night before, I'm probably gonna be hungover. Maybe I might look hungover. I might not be on my mental game, right, to make a video like this. But when being sober, a Saturday morning is pretty much the same as a Tuesday morning. And it was pretty crazy how I felt like I had a lot more time, and also realized of how much of a time sink alcohol can be with the whole aspect of, let's say, you getting ready, going out, pre-gaming, going to bars and clubs, coming back, getting horrible sleep. Again, I know some of this is Captain Obvious, but I want to mention it because my favorite quote is, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So that's why I want to talk about all this kind of stuff that I've learned more from experience rather than maybe what I could read online or what I would expect a sober month to be like and feel like. But the time thing is big, that I just felt like I had way more time in the month. Now, don't get me wrong. In this video, I feel like I'm bashing alcohol pretty hard. And I do want to be honest, that some of my favorite memories are going out, drinking with friends, having a ton of fun, going to events, completely worth it. And I don't know who said this, but there's a quote I've seen a lot online of people saying, alcohol is taking happiness away from the next day. The idea that you're wasting your happiness the night beforehand, because the next day, you're of course not happy because you're not feeling the best. And I feel mixed about that, because sometimes I wake up hungover, spent a ton of money, and I'm like, you know what though? That was a great night. No regrets. Other times though, it's the exact opposite, where I'm like, I completely regret that. Not worth it whatsoever. So it does depend situation to situation, of course. But it was really interesting in general how I noticed myself, as opposed to being like, oh, it's a Saturday morning or it's a Sunday, should I kind of schedule or be prepared to not be at my best? As opposed to me looking at the week like 5 plus 2, like I said, I looked at it as just a straight 7. In addition, I do want to talk about non-alcoholic drinks on this video. You know, I posted a video a while ago where I compared the Heineken OO beer to the Heineken Original. Could barely tell the difference. I posted a video recently about me having non-alcoholic liquor. I gotta say, you know, when doing a sober month, my main tool, if like say I did want to go out, was to have non-alcoholic beer. I gotta be honest, because I know some people hate on it, or I have had people be like, Mark, really non-alcoholic beer? Don't knock it till you try it. You know, I've said this before, that I've had friends be like, Mark, I just don't get it. And then they go out with me, they have non-alcoholic beer, and they're like, look, I kind of get it. There is something, again, it could be placebo even, where you're sipping something that tastes exactly like beer. It looks like beer, it feels like beer, it feels like the real experience. And there's something about having non-alcoholic drinks, especially non-alcoholic beer. You'd be surprised where there are some non-alcoholic beers that taste exactly like the real thing. For example, last month, one of my favorite beers was the Bravis West Coast IPA. So it was not only just an IPA or a non-alcoholic IPA, but it was specifically a non-alcoholic West Coast IPA, like say versus a New England IPA, for example, and it tasted unbelievable. I even had one of my friends try it, being like, oh, try this IPA, and she loved it. And I was like, actually, there's no alcohol in it. I have also heard that throughout the years now, with people focusing on health, and I think people also realizing just how bad alcohol is for you, non-alcoholic beverages have started to become a pretty big market, where a lot of companies now are saying, okay, well, we kind of have to create our own alternative. And if I had to pick one, two, I know some people ask me, like, what's your favorite non-alcoholic beer? It does fluctuate, but the one that I've been really big on recently is the non-alcoholic Peroni. The Peroni 0.0 just slaps. I love Peronis in general. And I feel like it's also kind of tough to emulate that Italian beer type taste, and that non-alcoholic Peroni just nails it. When it comes to all my videos, I like to be also very transparent about the good, the bad, and the ugly and everything. I might also talk about being tempted to drink. I know that's something a lot of people have asked me, saying, hey Mark, I'm trying to be sober, but I feel tempted when I go out, do you have any tips or whatever, I will say I have a link listed below in the description to a video I did about 5 ways to party while being sober, talking about some of my techniques. And I will say the temptation with alcohol for me personally is, I think, kind of interesting, maybe the same or maybe different than other people. Now, first off, I don't really get tempted during the week because I don't really drink during the week anyway. So it's really only on weekends that I felt tempted. And I found the biggest thing for me, which is kind of interesting or maybe counterintuitive, I don't know, is I'd get the biggest cravings to drink or want to drink when it was something low-key that the activity was drinking and there was really nothing else going on. What I mean is, let's say, which may be different for some people, if let's say I went to an EDM nightclub and I was partying and everything, I actually cared about drinking alcohol less. Granted, I am a DJ and electronic musician, so for me, when I go to nightclubs, I'm like, okay, music first, the experience first, alcohol second. So let's say when I go to a nightclub, or I'd go to a bar with pool or shuffleboard or some type of activity that I find I don't really care or think about drinking because it's the thing or the activity first, then alcohol second. I found the hardest part is if, let's say, I go to a dive bar and there's nothing else going on in that dive bar except people sitting at the bar and drinking. I have found that's actually when it's the most tempting because it seems like that the main focus of what you're doing in a sense is alcohol and then everything else secondary. And it almost seemed like, which is really, at least for me, kind of counterintuitive. Again, this could be a personal thing, is I got the most tempted to drink when it was a more low-key environment. And what's interesting about being tempted is how much alcohol is everywhere. Now, like I said, I only drink on the weekends, not during the week. However, I know some people who have been like, hey, Mark, I'm not gonna lie, I'm drinking every day. I'm gonna do a sober month to be healthy. And they struggle with it. And I think the main reason why, among a lot of different things, right, a lot of different things, is you don't really realize how much our society revolves around alcohol until you actually go sober, even for just a month. I mean, think of it. If you pull up Google Maps and search bar, there's a bajillion bars everywhere. There are hundreds of thousands, maybe if not millions, of establishments built just for the pure purpose of consuming alcohol. Alcohol is pretty much in every TV show, every movie, a bunch of billboards. There's a bunch of, pop references. Musicians talk about alcohol all the time. And I know some of this is a bit obvious, but I think sometimes it's the most obvious cliches that are the easiest to overlook. And I will say, even before I did a sober month, I did realize, oh yeah, our society loves drinking, right? And then when you compare that to how bad alcohol actually is for you, it's pretty wild when you think about it from like a big picture perspective. And with that all being said, might as well talk about what is my plan for the future, right? Because I know in this video, talking about all these different things, I realized I really bashed alcohol pretty hard. And I will say, I'm still gonna continue to drink. And sometimes I do love meeting up with friends on a Friday night, grabbing drinks, going out, bar hopping, going to a nightclub, going to, let's say, a comedy show that has a typical 2-drink minimum and a lot more. And now I think just in general plan to drink a lot less. Not saying I drank a lot beforehand, but I think just looking now at all the studies, I mean, I read one that found that if you, let's say, drink just 2 drinks a day, which I feel like a lot of people do. A lot of people, let's say, have 2 drinks when they come home from work or 2 glasses of wine. People who drank just 2 drinks a day, their brain aged years, which is pretty wild. I think the only reason why we don't think alcohol is as bad as it is because it's so normalized, like I said. And I think my perspective now is I'd almost rather maybe save the money or take that same money I would spend on drinking and partying and maybe do something else that's just as fun, but of course a lot healthier for me in general. And so overall, I still plan to go out and party, of course, and have fun and have drinks and everything, but do so in such a way that I now understand the full kind of picture of both the good, but also the bad of alcohol.